Hello and welcome back to One Trick Luxem. Today is the day before Asphodel Paradise starts. So I know some of you may have already been cracking open packs and checking to see what are the spicy new techs available for all of your decks across the spectrum. And for Luxem, well, we got one card. Basically just one card that I think is really interesting and potentially quite good into the game. And as you can see from what's in front of you, it is Vel-ocity Punch. Now, if you're not aware of this card, it is a 2-cost item that has the effect where you can pay 3, sacrifice the item, and deal 3 unpreventable damage to your champion in order to draw 2 cards into your memory. Now, essentially what this is it costs 5, it burns you for 3, and you draw 2 into memory. So it's a very slow card. In the past, people have played in Luxem Woolbrook or other similar cards in order to generate influence into the control matchup or into matchups where you just aren't dealing a lot of damage to each other and there's not a lot of fast tempo in the game. This card kind of does that, except way better, and also gives you some avenues and unlocks some plays that were normally not available into various matchups. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Aggro. In the new format, we don't know what the meta is going to be like, but you can expect a lot of aggro, you can expect a lot of fractals, you can expect a lot of quick damage dealt to your champion. And in that kind of meta, you might think, hey, dealing damage to myself might not be the smartest idea. However, in this video, I'm going to try and help you turn that idea on its head and kind of show the pros and cons of dealing damage to yourself, especially in a fast metagame. So let's take a look at Firedale-chan, let's take a look at Suzaku, let's take a look at any of these aggro archetypes. Essentially, they all have a couple things in common. The first is that they're going to kill you in about 3 turns. 3 to 4 turns, 5 turns tops, you are dead in the ground. And in these kind of matchups, what you want to do is you want to level quickly and then pray for a Luxem site. And then if you can resolve a Luxem site, the entire game flips on its head and you've basically won if you're able to heal back to full. That's usually a good approach to aggro. However, in the past and currently, there's a lot of healing hate. There's Fiery Interference, there's Infernal Vessel, there's Morgan. In a couple store champs I went to before, one of my locals even cited in Infernal Vessel and Morgan and Fiery Interference. So sometimes you just don't have healing available to you. And in these cases, what you have to do is you have to shift to an aggressive strategy. You have to be able to deploy your damage very quickly, and the good news is, in these aggressive decks, they usually have no protection. So, all you have to do is flip maybe 2 or 3 yellows in your recollection, they go hands down, and you basically have your entire turn to try and kill them before they kill you. And typically some of these lines include double Lightweaver's Assault, Lightweaver's Assault plus Striking Luminance, that costs 8, and it does 10 damage plus 2 times the number of Luxem that you have available. Lightweaver's Assault from Thieving Cut. Traditionally, you can even do this with 7 Influence, especially if, deadly if you have Insignia of the Korhazi to trigger if you're under 7 Influence. You also have Lightweavers and Planet Explosives. This will deal around 10 damage, but it's at fast speed as well, so you can catch them off guard that way. But sometimes there are other lines that you might not be able to see. So, quick story time. I was at Locals a couple weeks ago and I actually missed Lethal because I wasn't able to see the damage. I had 2 Lightweavers and an Uncover the Plot, and I was recollecting 2 7 cards in hand. What I didn't know was that my opponent on level 1 Dao-chan at 7 damage was already dead, and I didn't even know it, because all I had to do was point all of the damage for my Lightweaver's triggers to my opponent, bringing them from 7 plus 4 damage to 11, recollect, and then play Uncover the Plot, deal 2 damage off the Lightweavers, play another Lightweavers, and it was about perfect lethal what I had on board, I believe, but sometimes lethal just falls into your hands, and it's important to take time after each game to see, hey, could I have played that game better and presented lethal faster? So in this video, I want to talk about the concept of presenting lethal faster because that's the edge that Fire Luxem Xander has over Wind Luxem Xander or over Water Luxem Xander. We don't have a lot of options compared to those elements, but we do have speed. And with this new item in our arsenal, we can also do some nasty things. So in the past, when we're presented with a brick hand of all yellow cards, we die. Or we try and do whatever we can to kill them, but usually we die. In this new meta, what you can do is you can actually crack a Chalice of Blood, and you can also modulate the damage that you're taking using the Vel-ocity Punch in order to consistently crack that Chalice of Blood. So if you had 17 damage, you could crack one Vel-ocity Punch, hit yourself to 20, and then essentially dig 4 cards deeper into your deck. You can even crack it at potentially 14 damage to yourself if you have 2 Vel-ocity Punches. If you're at 12 damage to yourself, you can do some crazy shenanigans. You could Lightweaver trigger target yourself, and then crack 2 punches, and then crack the Chalice of Blood. But essentially what this new item does is it lets you modulate the damage that's coming into you. So in this example, this is a typical hand of what you would see. Let's say you are playing against Aggro, and you had to turbo level because you're forced to do so, and you were able to resolve a dungeon guide. You have 2 cards in hand, which are Lightweaver's Assault and anything, Planet Explosives. What you can do is, in your following turn, instead of materializing Backup Charger, or something that would put your hand into memory, you can actually make Chalice of Blood instead, crack the Lost Providence to draw a 3rd card in hand, and then take 3 damage off Vel-ocity Punch, draw 2 more cards into memory, and then crack Chalice of Blood to draw 2 into your hand. What does that look like, and how does that change the way we play into this new meta? Well, let's take a look at how we used to do things. This is a slide from my previous video about how much influence you should have in your hand in order to go for game with 8 cards. And I'm assuming that you are able to resolve a Striking Illuminance combo in this matchup, and I'm just trying to figure out, okay, how quickly can we get to a kill turn? So in this example, we go 1 with a plus. This can be either Gentle Respite or Creative Shock. We go to 2 with a cantrip. Usually that's something like Exploit Vulnerability or Juggle Knives. You play the Dungeon Guide with 7 influence. You have 3 in hand, and then you make Backup Charger with your Lost Providence trigger, and then all you need is 1 more +1 in order to hit 8 influence as you recollect. Well, Vel-ocity Punch is another source of a +1, and what that looks like is here. Let's say, for example, we level to 1 using Creative Shock, and then before Recollection, we use Juggle Knives, and this sets up the Assassin card in the grave. Recollect, we're at level 1, we have 7 influence. Now, you can actually go to 2 using the Vel-ocity Punch, and you can put 2 of useless cards into your memory, banish them with your level 2, and then pick up the Juggle Knives. And then that way, you're able to recollect with 6 influence in hand. With 6 influence in hand, you can play Dungeon Guide and then have 2 in hand, because 6 minus 4 is 2 left over. When you make your Lost Providence, it also means that when you recollect the turn after, you can crack the Lost Providence for 3, and then you can use those 3 cards to crack the Chug Jug. And then if your opponent hit you to 17 damage, you're at 20 damage, so you can materialize a Chalice of Blood, and bada bing, bada boom, you're at 8 influence. Now, 8 influence isn't actually enough to kill in most circumstances, but knowing that this is possible means that if you open an entire hand of yellow cards, a Vel-ocity Punch, and a Juggle Knives, and maybe even a Dungeon Guide, you know what's possible, and you know how quick the tempo of the game could be. It also means that when you have Angelic Channeling, and you're just banishing all these useless yellow cards into an aggro matchup, you can actually consider, hey, these are useless right now, yeah, but when I recollect to 8 in hand, all I need are 4 Luxem cards, a Striking and a Lightweaver's, and immediately ends the game, because typically 10 plus 2x, x is 4 Luxem, that's 18 damage. You're also doing 1 damage with the Dungeon Guide, that's 19 damage. That's enough to kill most level 1 champions. So when you're playing the game and you're seeing these channelings and you're banishing cards that aren't very useful to you, it could be an Uncover, it could be a Luxem site when you have the Infernal Vessel on you, know that that is contributing towards your win con. So it's no longer extremely useless, it's just delaying the burst of damage that you're doing later in the game. So that's aggro, but another aspect to consider is control or any grindy matchup. If you have someone at locals that you played against and they play Neos, they play Safeguard Amulet, they play all these things that reduce damage, it's really hard to break through multiple layers of interaction and shield. And what will end up happening is you have to wait until you have a billion yellow cards in hand, you reveal your whole memory, they put their whole hand down, and then you have to do something like striking Illuminance into a Lightweavers, to do a billion damage, and that's the only way you can realistically close the game out against a 30 health champion that has a bunch of damage reduction effects on board. Well, good to say, it's a lot easier now. Because in the past, all you could really do is 2 Lightweaver's Assault with 10 cards in hand representing 16 damage. Now, with a Vel-ocity Punch on board, you can actually wait until you're at 13 cards in hand with those same 2 Lightweaver's Assaults, and when you go for the kill, you can play Lightweavers, pay 3 for the punch, draw 2 into memory, and then that is 4 plus 4 plus 5 for 13. 13 times 2 is 26. This is 26 damage at fast speed. So you can even do this before the Safeguard Amulet hits the board, for example. But then if you think about the math, because you've had 2 Lightweaver's Assaults, when you recollect and draw, or when you recollect and trigger, you're theoretically already dealing 4 damage with the Lightweavers, assuming they're not stopping you. So 4 plus 26 is 30. You can completely deplete a 30 health champion in one go if you have a Vel-ocity Punch and enough cards in hand. So this is a new breakpoint that wasn't available to us before. So previously, we had two Lightweavers for 10 cards, 16 damage. We might have had Striking Illuminance in there for an 8 card lethal line, but now we're able to be presenting a lot of damage with just 1 Lightweaver's Assault. With 1 Lightweaver's and 2 Vel-ocity Pump triggers, we're representing 14 damage with 11 cards. Is it a lot worse than 10 cards 16? Yeah, but at the same time, you only need 1 Lightweaver's. Meaning, you can, if you're never seeing damage all game, you can Luxera's map 1 Lightweaver's, and if you have 2 Vel-ocity Punches, that should be enough to be able to close the game in a timely manner. If your opponent Regal Inquisitions you, you lose the Incap War, and you lose 2 Lightweaver's Assaults, what if you draw into your third one? Your third one is able to close out the game much more consistently this way as well. So, Vel-ocity Punch is an interesting card. It's mostly strong in mid-range, it's mostly strong in control. It's not the best into aggro, but it does speed you up fast enough where it's not completely dead in aggro. Again, if you have a card in your deck that's completely dead in one matchup, you use it as cost. You use it to pay for your Resolute stands, or you use it to pay for whatever have you in order to keep yourself alive, and you banish it in the future. So, to close things out, we know Vel-ocity Punch is worth testing, but how many copies do we run? I will tell you now, 4 is probably the incorrect number, but I'm going to start off the season at 4 copies of Vel-ocity Punch, just so I can test it out, just so I can see it more often, and then be able to test the levels, and then start cutting Vel-ocity Punch for additional pieces. If you take your current deck list, what you can do is you can identify the slots for Vel-ocity Punch based on where it fits within your needs. I went 4-2 at my most recent regionals last season, so I'm very happy with that build. I have maybe 3 or 4 slots that I'm easily able to take out for Vel-ocity Punch, but for your build might differ a little bit from my build. I think a really easy exclusion right now is something that's consistent and generic, because Velocity Punch is also consistent and generic. We could take out Scry the Skies for Velocity Punch, and that basically does a very similar thing in the late game, because Scry the Skies is strongest when you're level 3. Velocity Punch is okay when you're level 3, but it does a kind of a different thing. You could do a 2-2 split of Velocity Punch and Scry the Skies, and that's more than enough consistency to glue your deck together. However, if you like to high roll your opponent with Return to the Archive, Velocity Punch, I feel, is a straight upgrade in this case, because in the past you could Return to the Archive for that +1, and they could Topsy you and you lose that. On top of that, it required you to lose the Mercblade from your material deck, which sometimes you do want that 1 damage, especially when you have a Sadie, and sometimes it's good for certain breakpoints, but a Velocity Punch over your Return to the Archive is just an easy slot in. A Sadie, depending on your meta, might go out for Velocity Punch. I think if the meta is at a point where there's a lot of allies and small little creatures or tokens or droids running around, yeah, Sadie might be a better call here. But if it's not, Velocity Punch is always relevant because it gives you access to power in the mid and late game. Sadie kind of trails off at around that time. Sadie is the most powerful at the beginning of the game. So Velocity Punch versus Sadie is depending on what you want to focus on, late game, early game, or a mix of both. And lastly, if you have copies of Regal Inquisition in your deck, usually we use Regal Inquisition to guarantee our kill lines or make our kill lines uninteractable. Regal Inquisition can't be replaced by Velocity Punch, but you can consider Velocity Punch over Regal if you want more late game plays. If you're using Regal mostly for late game interaction density, Velocity Punch might take the same place as that card slot. So depending on how you want to build your deck, you should probably consider Velocity Punch. It's got what Luxem needs, it's got card draw, and that's more than enough for me. Wishing you all the best in your deck building and have a great and fun season. See ya!